Good morning, Evangel. Good to see all of you today. If you don't have sermon notes, we've contracted with Amazon and they're dropping them off via drone outside your door. I'm just kidding. That would be cool though. We do have the app today, so we have digital notes on the app. If you don't have the app, you can just go to the App Store and look that up and get it. And you can find the notes there to follow along, or however you're going to do it, that is totally fine. So welcome to our living room. This is our living room where we hang out a lot, and we're so glad to be in your living room wherever you're watching today. And it's our privilege to join you, and we know however we do this, whether we're on the platform or a sanctuary or a classroom, that God is with us no matter where we're at. And we know today in our title, Closer Than You Think, that God's going to give us some new perspective. And that's what our goal is today, is that perspective and how we look at the world around us is closer than maybe we would realize. So we have been playing board games here at the house every night, and maybe cards or whatever we're playing. But the other night we played Sorry. I posted this online. It was a very dejecting moment for me. You could see here someone's in their home, or Alex in his house. Jill's almost all in her house, and there's a couple pieces on the board I haven't even played yet. And it was super discouraging. And then we had people making comments online when I posted this picture. Pastor Todd said, you know, it's because you're wearing the Vikings hat, and the Vikings have never won a big game. And I just want you to know I won one time, like 4 days later, wearing something like that. Well, actually that hat. Okay, then in the middle of playing this game, we got a text that said we had been TP'd. And we were like, oh no, at first, because last time we were TP'd, it rained a lot after, and it took a long time to clean up. And then the time before that, I don't know why, but Esri actually helped TP our house, so that was really interesting, which is what helped us later, because she actually cleaned that up. But so we were told that, and we looked outside, and when we looked outside, we noticed a lonely roll of, a package of toilet paper out there, and Alex said, oh no, there's someone coming, and so he sprinted out to get it and showed a lot of hustle, and we can see him coming back here on the next, just like a blur on the screen. And so whoever sent that to us, thank you, we appreciate it. Drive-by TPing was pretty awesome. Then we got in, and we looked close, and it was the good stuff, premium, ultra premium bath tissues, less lint. We don't know what that means, but I think it's true, and that's all I got to say there. So I did post this online last week as well. Pastors, when they tell a joke in the live stream this Sunday, we're just out here on an island. We don't know if you're laughing. We don't know what you're thinking, but I'm just going to assume that I mean, it's just laugh tracks are happening across the city. But anyway, here we go. So you might remember Pastor Scott Hagan from North Central was with us this last fall, and he sent a few of us a devotional and an outline, maybe about a 5-minute read. And in it was so full of life and so full of power that I did a deep dive into that. And what I found just filled me with so much hope and life in expanding into what he shared, that I want to share with you from Psalm 77, something that I think is pretty powerful and is going to speak right to where we're living. So Psalm 77 is about an individual or a family who's going through tragedy or disaster. Or it's probably, just knowing Israel's history, that individual or family has been swept up in a national disaster, something that the whole nation is going through. And I just thought this would be a great thing for us to review, and a great thing for us to look at, since really every church in America and every person in America seems to be walking through this together, and yet we deal with it on an individual level. So as you read through this passage, you can feel the pain as he begins to reflect on his journey. Psalm 77 says, when I was in deep trouble, remember that phrase, when I was in deep trouble, I searched for the Lord. All night long I prayed with hands lifted high, and he's got power praise going on there, right? My soul, though, was not comforted. So he's searching for God, he's searching for answers, and his soul is not being comforted. And I just want to start with that first phrase, I searched for the Lord. One of the things we have noticed these last few weeks is that there are some who have found themselves doing something that they normally maybe haven't been doing. They've started searching for the Lord. And maybe for the first time, or maybe for a long time, and people have begun to search for him in some new ways. Maybe be open to him, maybe be thinking about, maybe finding themselves praying in ways that they haven't before. And I would guess that some of you who are watching today are searching for the Lord in a new way. And this is a moment where you're looking for God in a fresh way. Others of us are in a place where we're kind of in the middle of all kinds of emotions right now. Some of us we're in the middle of a second or third week of endless shifts at the hospital, or things being way different than they ever were before. Some of us in the food service industry, you're facing this in a whole different way of how you're delivering and how you're dealing things at your restaurant. And for all of us, I think the novelty has worn off a little bit, and the reality has begun to set in of what we're facing. Some of us haven't been around our spouse this much ever, and it is a brand new dynamic. Others of us are learning to eat at home. We're used to eating out. Others of us are learning to cook. And then others of us are learning to eat what those who are learning to cook are making. And, don't look across the living room, but you guys know who you are. I mean, it's unsettling. We have 4 people in our house. We're in all different levels trying to figure this out, different rooms, and we've set ourselves up for school and study and work, but you can hear every creak and every noise, and there's crossover and all this stuff. We've heard about spouses who didn't know that their spouse liked to work with music on, and they hate having music on. I mean, it's the little things that just kind of get you when you're always in each other's space. And then we have others who are extroverts, and right now that, they're extroverts, but maybe they're single and they're in an empty house and it's driving them crazy. And then you have others who are introverts who are like, this is what heaven's going to be like. And they just can't wait for it. They're like, this just being by myself is great. And then other introverts, you used to maybe send kids off to school and others, and they're just with you all the time. And you're ready for that social distancing to be more like 60 feet, just so you can have some people not in your space. And then there's others of us who are dealing with the emotions of a cut in our hours at work, or maybe the loss of a job, or we are worried about our employees, and just the emotions of this are really been a lot to deal with, and then it's from a virus we can't even see, and it's hard to even wrap our minds around. And the list goes on and on. I know some of you have wanted to visit parents and you can't because you're worried about putting them in danger. Some of us have been sick and wondering, do I have the virus? So wherever you are, let me just give you a little bit of perspective today. There's a difference between trouble and deep trouble. There's a difference between trouble and deep trouble. Sometimes we are so overwhelmed by a new set of circumstances that we have a hard time differentiating between these two. Because trouble has a spectrum. Not all trouble is the same. Some of us are troubled and some of us are in trouble. And then there's a few of us that are maybe even in deep trouble today. And it's important to identify the difference because it changes our perspective. Now, some of us, the trouble that we're facing is no fault of our own. And some of us, though, if we were completely honest, we're in more trouble than we should be because of the choices that we've made. The truth is, maybe there's some of us who are listening today that have been neglecting some of the things in our life, and maybe we ignored those whispers and we kept moving forward even though we knew that living on the edge, all the time was not sustainable, and now we're finding ourselves in trouble, maybe even some deep trouble. So no matter where you are, I just want you to hear this. If right now you're living with some regret of something maybe you should have done or decisions you should have made differently, and the realization is all too real in this moment that you've neglected maybe an area of your life, and what should be a manageable trouble feels as if it's an unmanageable trouble, it's in that spot that I think we need to just talk right now, because it's in that spot that the enemy of your soul will try to tell you how off course you are, and try to tell you that God's not going to listen to your moment of trouble. And I just want you to know that this is not the truth, that He hears our cries. He hears when we cry out from our depths of despair. He hears when we walk through troubled times. And whether your deep trouble, if that's where you're at today, is self-inflicted, society-inflicted, or wherever it is, here's what our writer is saying. He is not in a place where he's hearing from God, but I do want you to hear the truth, because that's not the reality. Psalms tells us this: the Lord hears His people when they call to Him for help. He rescues them from all of their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. So today, if you find yourself in a brokenhearted spot, or your spirit's being crushed by what's happening, cry out to the Lord, because He does hear you. So no matter where we are, just like Pastor Miguel was saying last week, let's not be too prideful Let's not be too prideful to ask the Lord for help or to lean on Him when we find ourselves in these situations. So the writer then, he talks about, as he goes on, he begins to talk about being overwhelmed to the point where he can't sleep. And maybe that's where some of us have been. Some of the nights have gotten a little longer. We're worried by worry, or maybe you could say we're even troubled by trouble, and sleep eludes us. And in those moments, we can just begin to wonder what's going to happen. How are we going to make it? Hope so-and-so doesn't get sick. And if we're not careful, we can begin to cycle into a pattern where we really become ineffective in our daily lives. Psalm 77 says this: as he's laying in bed at night, sleep is thinking, he says, I begin to think of the good old days, long since ended. Maybe that's how we're feeling right now. Remember the good old days 3 weeks ago, and when my nights were filled with joyful songs. And then he said, I search my soul and I ponder the difference now. He begins to reflect on all the things that are different, and he begins to just rehearse them over and over in his mind. It's okay to mourn. It's okay to grieve loss. That's where a lot of us maybe are right now. We're in a mourning stage, or we're grieving a little loss, and there's going to be moments for that. But sometimes that can get overwhelming, and we can get lost in the mourning, and we can get lost in our grief and pain, and that's where we can find ourselves in some trouble. Now, some of us are in deep trouble, maybe right now, and then some of us, though, we're not there. But we're just so troubled by our trouble, and our routines are thrown off, and we quickly, we cycle way too quickly into this place. And the reality is we don't have deep trouble, but we're troubled like we do. Our emotions are at a point where we're acting as if everything is over. Our response is, we're kind of just going around the house saying all these things. And every once in a while I forget my own rule, and this is my own rule. Will this matter a few years from now? And if it's not, then why am I carrying this burden? Why am I having such anxiety about this? And there have been times in my past, you lay in bed and you just start thinking about how you wish it was better and how you wish it was different. And maybe that's been some of you, and you start to rehearse. And in those moments, man, we tend to lean into that pain and lean into that thing. And we've been, I wish it was different, and I wish this was happening. And maybe we find the country song about all the things we lost, or we begin to invite all of those emotions in. And we begin to think and just dwell upon how everything used to be better. And the good old days. And we're like, it's never going to be better than it used to be. It's never going to be there. And I just want to remind you, one of the mottos we have at the church is that the best is yet to come. And we need to believe that. And when we think that, my best moments are behind me, we begin to live and we begin to act like this guy here, Eeyore. And Eeyore, and maybe some of us, that might be a good example of how we're walking around the house right now. And we're like, woe is me, life stinks, this is the best it's ever going to be, I can't believe it's happening. And maybe that's some of us right now in this short season of time. But let me remind you that this is a season. It's a season. For the vast majority of us, it's going to pass in time. It's a season. And we can make it. We can get through this. So here's our next point, is this: too much nostalgia will paralyze your prayer life. Will paralyze your prayer life. Some of us, I just need to encourage you and challenge you. Stop thinking about what you've lost in this moment. Stop comparing eras, even if it's just a couple weeks from this era to the last era. And I promise you that even if you're thinking back about how good it used to be, that our minds begin to distort that a little bit, begin to skew that, begin to sanitize that. And the enemy wants to keep you circling back instead of facing this moment and seeing the opportunity that's before us. Because there's opportunity right here. There's possibility in this moment. Don't think about what could have been. And I encourage you, don't think about what used to be. I want you to start thinking about what's ahead. You see, when we pause to look back, what ends up happening, we begin to pause to look back, and then we begin to pause to look back, and then after a while, we begin to face backwards more than we're facing what's in front of us. And when we're pausing all the time, we're not moving forward. We're just standing there looking backward. And then we get surprised by things, and we get overwhelmed by things. And the only way out is forward. Forward. Memories are there to keep us grateful. But prayer and a purpose and a plan is how we tackle the mountain before us. So don't let prayer, nostalgia, paralyze your prayer life. So stop dwelling on the green pastures of the past, and remember, He was faithful then, and He's going to be faithful now, and His faithfulness is forward moving for us. Now the mountain ahead is what matters. What are you facing today that seems as if it's too much to overcome? Climbing it and getting over it are what matters. Maybe the mountain that you need to face today is, man, you've lost your job, and it's gut-wrenching, and it's bothering you, and it's worrying you. But maybe let's move that energy towards, what does God have for you next? Maybe there's a new door and a new opportunity for you. And begin to pray for your boss that's coming in the future, and begin to ask God to bless what's before you. Maybe the mountain is that hospital shift that some of you are facing right now, that, man, it is overwhelming, like we talked about just a couple of weeks ago, that maybe you begin to pray for, God, would you give me a divine intersection today where I could move and use my abilities for your glory and your purpose, and give me a moment to help me see, because I get to help people in the most traumatic moments of their lives. Maybe the mountain is your family. You're longing for the days when they used to be at school, instead of maybe relishing in the moment that you have, and creating this to be a moment. And I think this could happen where your kids look back and they're like, this was a great season for our family. So let me give you a few fresh ideas for those who might be going crazy. It's not easy to get through this season. We understand that, but I think it can be fruitful. Heard of one family, they're saying 1 day a week, they are trying with their little ones, preschoolers and right at school age, to say, make it a yes day. So if it's not illegal and it doesn't cost a bunch of money, they're trying to say yes to everything they do for 1 day. It's not going to hurt them. Say yes. Dessert first? Yes. Movie night? Yes. Double movie night? Yes. The game, board game, whatever one you want to play. Put daddy in makeup? Sure, go for it. Whatever it is. And then they said, we're going to do an all-nighter. But they did tell their kids, just so you know, it's the morning starts at midnight. So the kids got that. I like that one. A couple things you can do. Binge watch something together. VidAngel is free right now. It's going to edit out some of the junk maybe that's there that would allow you to watch some shows as a family. You could watch Netflix together. They've created a watch with friends page. You can do the same thing with Facebook watch parties. You can go to the What's Happening page and join one or more of the groups. So there's just a new inputs and comments and life into you. Here's one of the things we've said: get out of the house at least once a day. So the other day I had not been out of the house yet. It was night, and the family literally made me step outside the door. It was for a millisecond, but I did do it. Get creative. I love this. Here's one of our church family members, Jamie Simmons. They're making a little mural outside on the sidewalk chalk, getting ready to do that. Here's the after picture of that. Good job, kids. And here's another family that did that in church. Let me tell you, if you get into that, that's a long project. That'll be something worth doing. Connect with people. We're encouraging our staff and encourage you to spend an hour a day just engaging with people outside of your environment. I mean, it's not illegal to call people. Maybe we forgot that we have a phone. We can do that. It's coming back. FaceTime, just chat, and check in on your neighbors. Do some things. And we're just hearing reports as well. These are moments where you can pray for people in a way that maybe you haven't been able to do before. So whatever that mountain is, look for opportunities in these moments. So as we get back to our psalm here, the writer is caught up in self-despair. He's focused inwards, and maybe you've said what the writer says. He says, I can't pray. I feel like God isn't even there, and he isn't sleeping, and he spends all of his nights thinking about how it used to be, worried about now how it is, and you can almost see him just begin to write these words with a flourish. He writes this: has the Lord rejected me forever? Will God ever be kind to me again? Making just kind of, is his unfailing love gone forever? Have his promises permanently failed? I mean, he's like, this is going to be like this forever. Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he forgotten how to do that? And then check this out. Has he slammed the door on his compassion? Man, this guy is in a bad spot right now. And sometimes what we're finding, and maybe you've seen this in your own life, we let our temporary circumstances tell us that this is how it's always going to be. I love the raw honesty of Scripture. I just love that. And I just want you to know God can handle your emotions. God can handle what you're dealing with. And look at what he says here. He says this: God has not just forgotten me, he's rejected me. He isn't being nice to me. He withholds his love for me. His promises are forever gone. He has forgotten about me. And then look at that. When I needed him most, he slammed the door in my face. My goodness. I think we can all agree this guy is in some deep trouble. And it's easy to get caught up in the moment of feelings, right? Because our feelings are often tied to moments, and then those moments begin to overwhelm us. I remember one time in high school, 3 of us were asked from our school. We were Bloomington Kennedy. We'd lost to Bloomington Jefferson, our big rival. And they asked us to go to the other high school, Bloomington Jefferson, and give them a gift because they beat us to go to the state tournament. So I'm standing there in front of the whole student body. I'm just going to step out right here. Standing in front of the whole student body, and they've given me this plant to give to the school, the captains of the other basketball team. And while I'm standing there, it's their pep rally, I begin to rock back and forth, and all of a sudden I feel this wet come down like a little bit below my belt, and it begins to pour down my legs. And I'm like, what just happened? And they had filled the plant with too much water, and it spilled over onto me. And so when they called me to bring the plant up, I presented it to the guy, and then I had to stand in front of the whole student body with khaki pants on, looking like I had just wet myself. It was awful. And that one embarrassing moment, it stayed with me for weeks. And I began to say, God, where are you? What happened? How could you, leave me like that? And how could you allow this? And the reality, it wasn't really his fault. It was just something that happened. But I became so fixated on that moment that for a little while, it paralyzed me. And I just encourage you right now, it's a silly little story, but don't let circumstances or moments change your entire outlook upon God. Share with them where you are. Share your emotions, all those things. I want you to notice this little word here, interlude. Maybe your Bible says Selah if you're looking in your Bible. And that word Selah means to pause, that interlude, to think. That I want you to think about all that was just said, but sometimes it also means, I want you to just think about, is this really true? Is this really true what's happening in my life? And is that how I'm feeling, this despair? Am I doing this? And you just need to know he's handling despair, right? Because he's worked himself up, he's feeling all these things, and he's like, wait a second, I need to pause. I need to have pause for a second. And sometimes it's a pause for perspective. And we're just asking ourselves, is this really how it always is? Is this really how God works? Is this really true? Is what I'm feeling really true right now? Is it true that, in my case, God's against me because it looks like I wet my pants? Or is that just a funny story? That as an accident? And then if I would turn that around and begin to look at it a little differently, maybe even I could share it with a whole bunch of people online for everyone to see. But, or like, no, is this, is God rejecting me? Is God really punishing me? Is God punishing us? Or is it maybe that we could slow down and find some time to remember in this moment who really God is? So the writer steps away for a few minutes or a few hours, maybe a few days, who knows? But he takes an interlude. And when he comes back, he is in a completely different place mentally than he was before. Now his circumstances haven't changed, right? But his outlook sure has. And that's my hope for some of us today, that we could have a new focus and a new perspective by just changing some things about how we're thinking and processing. So he comes back, and I want you to see what he says. He says, then I recall all that you have done. Before he's like, God, where are you? You're gone. You're permanently left me. And he's like, but wait a second. I recall all you have done. Lord, I remember your wonderful deeds of long ago. I remember when you were with me. I remember when you helped me. I remember when I thought it was no way out before, and you came in and just changed everything. Those things are now constantly in my thoughts. I cannot stop thinking about your mighty works. Now here's an important point for us to remember. Your thoughts determine everything. What was happening? The circumstances hadn't changed, right? Nothing has changed, and yet everything has changed. Your thoughts determine everything. See, the circumstances of our life, they can jolt us. They can change our stability of our life, and we've all had that in the last couple of weeks, but we have the power and the autonomy to regain control of our thoughts. Nobody is telling you how to think. It is just your responsibility to do that. Nobody's forcing us to do that. Nobody can tell you what to do. So the Lord has to be more than a passing thought. Now, some of us, maybe we've been spending like 4 to 5 hours a day rehearsing how bad things are or the sorrow of how we're going through stuff. And we're spending like 4 to 5 minutes a day focused on God. God has to be at the forefront of our minds, not way back here. And when we're thinking and dwelling on other stuff other than His power, and his faithfulness, it begins to change how we view everything. And no wonder sometimes God seems so meager and not able to help, because we're focused on the problem instead of on the one who can help us get through this. So we can choose to bring his truth into the forefront of our minds. You see, when we mentally rehearse what he has done for us, and we begin to change how we think, there's a surge of confidence that comes with what he's about to do. And instead of going negative, we begin to say, God, we see the opportunity of what you've done in the past, and now we begin to look for, God, where are you in this situation? And we begin to look for how he's going to help us get through what we're going through right now. We begin to look for his hand and his handiwork around us. And these are the moments when faith is activated, and we begin to anticipate what God's going to do. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it does mean that our hope isn't gone. That hope is right before us because God is with us. And then the author remembers a moment where there's no hope. The Israelites had been dramatically released from slavery after 400 years. God intervenes, and then suddenly and dramatically they are free. And as they leave Egypt, they hear that Pharaoh has decided, I'm going to come after you guys. And he has changed his mind, and he is on his way to destroy them. And they have the Red Sea in front of them, and they have Pharaoh's army behind them, and literally they are in deep trouble. There is no way out. And the psalmist remembers this. And in verse 14 he says this, you are the God of great wonders. You demonstrate your awesome power among the nations. And then he says this, when the Red Sea saw you. Isn't that interesting? He says, when the Red Sea saw you, O God, its waters looked and trembled, and the sea quaked to its very depths. What an interesting and fascinating choice of words. And the people are looking at the Red Sea, and all they see is trouble and death and all these things before them, and there's no way out, and what are we going to do? And the author here personifies the Red Sea, and he says, wait a second. When the Red Sea saw you, God, it began to tremble, and it began to realize it was actually the one in deep trouble. And it's so fascinating that the Red Sea begins to quake to its very depth. So here's a little point I want to just share with you. It's not just God who sees the calamity. God sees what we're going through, and it's not just God who sees the calamity, but it's also the calamity that sees God. God is not, here's what I mean by that. God is not looking at this moment saying, oh no, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? What's going to happen? God is saying, okay, this is when I get to work. When trouble comes is when people begin to focus on me. People begin to depend on me. People begin to call out to me, and now I can work. The Red Sea saw God and trembled. You see, we think it's God who needs to recognize the storms of our life, but maybe it's the other way around. When we begin to call on God, when we begin to trust on God, it's the storm of our life that begins to see the Creator coming and realizing it can do nothing to stand up to our God. So this is profoundly important to our faith. The cultural giant that we're facing right now, this virus, the coronavirus, COVID-19, in reality is just a trembling speck compared to God's sovereignty. And who, by the way, can use the earth as his footstool. So the psalmist closes this way. Your road led through the seas, your pathway through the mighty waters, a pathway no one knew was there. You led your people along that road like a flock of sheep. So they saw deep trouble, and God says, no, I see a way out. They see that the death is before them, and God says, no, what you see as the big problem is actually a solution to something else. And God makes a pathway through the trouble into his promises. Wow, look at that, a pathway that nobody knew was there. That's our God. He has the ability to open doors we cannot open, to reveal paths that nobody else can see, to part the waters and move us forward. As I was thinking about this, there was a thought that just kind of hit me out of nowhere. Oftentimes, God uses us to answer other people's prayers. Remember when we said this, if God's over here and the need's over here, who's in the middle? It's often that we are. And in that moment, God just, I think, gave me an idea, and I don't know that it's from the Lord, but I just had this sense, because it wasn't mine, it just came to me, that maybe he was asking us to think about this a little bit differently right now, and maybe we could provide a pathway to help to people who are in big trouble right now. So the government is going to be sending us $1,200 checks, the vast majority of us adults who are watching this. And for some of us, that's going to be a lifeline. It'll be an answer to prayer. For some of us, it's going to help us get out of debt and help us to face whatever's around the corner with greater confidence. And this is a moment I just encourage you that we should all steward well. But then there are some of us. Some of us are working from home. Some of us, like, our expenses are down and we're still getting the full paycheck. And this is only going to move us forward into even more. It's like gravy. We weren't expecting it, and here it is. And Jill and I were talking that we kind of feel like this is an Acts 2 moment. And if you remember Acts 2, it says the believers were so tight. They had so much in common. They were so unified that they made sure that everybody's needs were met. That if somebody had extra, that they would give out of that extra to give to those who had great need. And we feel like that this could be maybe an Acts 2, a New Testament moment for our church. And if this is a moment where when that check arrives, you're like, you know what, this is extra for us. Would you consider maybe after your tithes giving a part of that to a coronavirus or COVID-19 relief fund? We're going to form a small task force with Pastor Chris, a staff member or two, maybe a board member, and some people in the church. And we're going to set up a fund to help people who find themselves in deep crisis or deep trouble. And we could help take care of one another. That's what we're thinking, that we could maybe help some of our missionaries that are affected by this and some people who have just lost a lot of things. So this week we're going to send you an email. We're going to send you an email saying these are the kind of things these resources would go for. And then in a couple weeks when you receive that check, maybe would you pray about giving a portion of that to this relief fund so that we who maybe have a little extra in this moment can rally around those who don't, and the church could be a part of the solution in this season. Jill and I are praying about this, and we think we're probably going to give at least $500 to $1,000, maybe even more. $1,000 probably is what's on my heart, and just give that to that so we can be a blessing to others. A lot of us were thinking, man, I want to help. I don't know what to do. There's something tangible. So pray about it. That's what we're asking, and whatever the Lord would put on your heart out of that extra, that this is a moment where we could rally around one another. And I just want to say this again. If these resources are a lifesaver for you, please put them to that use. That would be fantastic. Use them in a way that can help you get out of a hole or just have some relief in this moment to pay some rent. But if there's extra, would you consider giving to this fund? And you can just write coronavirus on your check or on your envelope, or you can see the drop-down menu online. Because this may be a moment that God can use us to help form a path for others where there doesn't seem to be a way out. Which leads us to our last point today. God is going to lead us, and God will lead you through this new experience. He hasn't gone anywhere. He's still on the throne. He's still in control. We may feel like things are out of control, but God's going to lead you through this new experience. The truth is today, COVID-19 has placed us on a road with brand new experiences that we didn't even know were possible or even existed just 3 or 4 weeks ago. But the Lord's still leading our lives, just like He led Israel. Things have changed. Things have been reduced. We can't just go anywhere carefree at the moment. We just can't go here or there without a thought. And we have to take more care. We have to be more considerate. We have to be more, take into consideration the people around us and how we shop and what we do and the distance between one another. And we have been forced to slow down, except for maybe a few of you who are really speeding up in this time. But during this season, kind of what I want to just look at is we're being pruned. We're being pruned, and God's leading us in this season. And if we will allow Him access to prune us through some new things and to help us, we feel like even though that might be painful for a season, could it be that some of the excess of our life, some of the things that maybe shouldn't have been there before, some of the focuses that were off in one direction, now we get refocused and we come out of this season when we come out fresh and new with a new determination and a clean outlook on life, and we become out freer than what we went in. That's our hope for us today. As a society, our protective bubble wrap has been kind of popped here in our life, and we aren't as invincible as we thought, right? We aren't as powerful. We're not invincible. Man, just something small can affect the entire world. And And God has a plan for you and a path for you and your family through this season. So what we're going to do right now is I thought, remember that interlude we saw on the screen earlier? We're just going to take an interlude for a minute. And here's what I want you to do. Have your thoughts been right where they should be? Have you been maybe sliding into fear or sorrow or, man, this is the worst thing ever and I can't believe this, or despair or worry or fear or whatever those are? And we just want you to hit pause just for the next 4 minutes or so. And I found a song that I'd never heard before that just talks about us facing like the Red Sea of our life, and that just having the confidence that because God's been there before, He's going to see us through again. So I wanted you to watch this little video, this lyric video, and I want you to take a pause, and then I want you to think and reorient yourself around some God thoughts. Because you can determine your thought action and the thoughts of your life and begin to reorient them around God, and then begin to rehearse what God's done in your life, what He said through you before, and then have the faith to turn around and face the mountain that we're all facing today with renewed hope and renewed purpose. So Lord, I just ask right now that you would speak life to people in these next 3 or 4 minutes as we listen to this powerful song. Thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Listen to this.